All right, this one's going to be a little bit different than my typical video. I want to just go over the vocab or the basics about a lot of the different effects and words in the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. Now with the remaster, there's a lot of people who haven't played the game either in a long time or ever. Maybe you've only played Skyrim. And my channel just got a bunch of new subs. So if you're one of my old subscribers, I love you, and you probably already know what all of this means, but this video isn't really for you. So I'm going to talk about these effects here at the top, and we're going to start with Drain. So Drain is a temporary effect. It temporarily lowers the max and current value, and these are the 5 things it can affect: attribute, fatigue, health, magicka, and skill. When it ends, it goes right back to normal. Now this is a very cheap spell. It's useful for executions. You can do a drain health for 100 points for just 1 second, and that can finish off an enemy with 100 health. Because it only lasts 1 second, it's not useful at all if they don't die, but it can be really useful to finish enemies off. Enemies might drain your skills and attributes, and honestly, it's not even that bad. Ignore that typo, I'm not going to fix it. Because as soon as the duration ends, it just goes back to normal. So that won't really bother you that much. So just to make sure we understand the math, draining magicka 6 points for 3 seconds reduces your max magicka and your current magicka by 6 for 3 seconds. Then it ends and it goes back to normal. Fortify is kind of the opposite of drain. This is temporarily increasing the max value and the current value of those same 5 things. When it ends, it goes right back to normal. So this is great for enchants because obviously if you're wearing something that fortifies your blade skill by 10, well then your blade skill is permanently increased by 10 until you unequip that item. This is also great for spell chaining. It doesn't work quite as well as it did in Classic Oblivion, but you can fortify your willpower and fortify your magicka. If you use 2 different spells, instead of replacing the duration, it will just add more magnitude. So you can make a lot of custom spells that fortify these 5 things that you want, however you want to. One change with the remaster is that originally in Classic Oblivion, you could not fortify 2 different attributes on the same spell, but now you can. So if I wanted to fortify speed and willpower, or maybe I want to fortify my restoration and my destruction skill within the same spell, you can do that now, because before in Classic Oblivion you either picked attribute or skill. Well, you could do both of them, but you picked one attribute and then that was the entire thing, and if you replaced it with any different attribute, it would replace it. Next we have damage. Damage is permanent in a way, and it's only these 4 things. There is no damage skill. You might notice sometimes your strength, willpower, or speed, or other attributes are red. That means they are damaged. It is a permanent decrease, and that can be annoying. You have to go to an altar or use restore, which is undoing damage. Now, this is pretty self-explanatory for health. We see that all the time in video games. If something damages your health 6 points for 3 seconds, well, it's going to tick 3 times and do 18 damage. I can restore health. 6 points for 3 seconds will heal me that 18 back, 6 each second. So unlike drain, it's not just something that ends, it ticks every second. And so you kind of multiply your magnitude and your duration. Now, these are obviously much more expensive than drain because they are permanent. You know, your fatigue and magicka regen on their own, so it's not permanent in that sense, but drain will literally restore the magicka back when it ends, where damage will, you just have to rely on your natural regeneration to heal you or use other restore methods. Now, absorb is what combines 2 of these effects, and there's 5 different types of absorb. We have attribute and skill, which both fortifies your own attribute and skills and drains your enemies. So remember, that's temporary. It is temporarily increasing your strength and reducing the enemy strength. A lot of new players seem to think that drain is absorb. You know, you hear that in like Final Fantasy, drain health would reduce your enemy's health and heal you. Drain is not absorb in Oblivion. Drain is just that temporary reduction, where absorb is the one that combines them. So health, for example, absorb health both damages your enemy health and heals you. Now, if you're doing this on master difficulty and you do absorb health 20, let's say, well, master difficulty has a multiplier for damage, and so you'll only do 0.2 times damage. So if you normally are dealing 20 damage, well, times 0.2, you'll deal 4. That's fine, you expect that. That's true with all damage spells on master difficulty, but because you're only dealing 4 damage, it will actually only restore 4 health as well. So absorb health on master difficulty is a very bad idea because the heal is also reduced by 5 times, where normally restore effects are not reduced by 5 times. So absorb combines these in these different ways. There's 2 that are drain and fortify, and there's 3 that are damage and restore. Absorb is more expensive, and it also has to be on touch, which kind of sucks. You know, I always wanted to have an astronaut character that used a bow that would fortify someone's magicka and then absorb it, but You can't do that because Absorb just doesn't work with a bow unless you're in melee range. In Classic Oblivion, if your enemy got too far away, the link ended. I've never actually done it yet in the remaster, so I should probably say that just so we know. I'm not exactly sure if it's changed. And it wasn't very consistent. It was kind of annoying. So it was decent for instant effects in melee because it didn't matter if your enemy got away from you. But you'll notice if there's like a link between your enemy and you, they're probably absorbing something of yours. Okay, next we have Reflect Spell. Reflect Spell is a % chance to reflect a spell back at your enemy. It's very expensive to cast on yourself. It's got a huge base cost. This 3.5 is about 7 times expensive as a shield spell on yourself. But there are 2 guaranteed drops. The Spellbreaker is from a Daedric quest. It's a shield that gives 30%. And the Mundane Ring, if you're over level 22, I believe, drops from the main quest and gives you 35%. So you can get 65% from just guaranteed items. However, if an enemy has a reflected spell, this does not save you from that. So if you shoot something at a Dremora with Reflect Spell and it bounces back to you, Reflect Spell will not help you at all. Now, Spell Absorption is a % chance to eat the base mana cost. So just like Reflect Spell, this is again a % chance. You're either taking full damage or no damage at all with these two. That's why they're in the same row here. It's also expensive. If you pick the Atronach Birth Sign, that's the main way to get Spell Absorption. There's other ways too. There's Spell Drinker's Amulet, but I don't want to dive into the details. However, you usually want to pick either Reflect Spell for your build or Spell Absorption. Because if you combine them, if you look here, if I have 30% Reflect chance and 50% Absorb chance, well, that adds up to 80% from my gear or from my Birth Sign maybe. So if I'm using Spellbreaker and I'm an Atronach, this happens pretty typically. That's 80%. However, I'm still going to take, there's a 35% chance I'm still going to take that damage. And the math there is actually pretty easy. You're just looking at, well, I have a 70% chance to take damage to not reflect, and I have a 50% chance to not absorb. So I'm just doing 70% times 50%, and that's 35%. Even if you get to 80% and 80%, which adds up to 160% from stats, which you're probably never going to get, that's still a 4% chance to take damage. Where if you just got 100% in any of them, well, then it's 0, even if it's 100 and 0. So you want to get 100 in one of them, and then you don't have to take damage at all. Unless you don't want to break the game and you always want to have a chance to take damage, then it's nice to combine them. Okay, resist magic and weakness. Well, resistance, it's a reduction to a multiplier. Your multipliers always start at 1. So if I have, you start at 1, that's my multiplier. Let's say, we'll say equals 1. And if I'm a Breton, well, I just add 0.5. And so just kidding. We subtract 0.5 because it is a resistance. Weaknesses are adding. So then all of my damage taken will be multiplied by 0.5. Weakness to magic does the opposite. If an enemy casts 100% weakness to magic, that would add +1. So for example, if I pick the Apprentice sign, it adds +1 because it's 100% weakness to magic, and I would take 1.5 times damage from all magic effects. Keep in mind, if it's something like Paralyze or Silence, instead of damage, those don't have a magnitude. It's just the duration that's multiplied by this multiplier. So if it's 0.5, the duration's cut in half. If it's 1.5, it's obviously increased. Resist and weakness to element work the same way, but obviously they're only for fire, shock, and frost damage. Now, I want to talk about an example of this multiplier. Zombies have 60% weakness to fire, and so their fire multiplier for all fire damage is times 1.6. But they also have 30% resistance to magic. So their multiplier for all magic effects is times 0.7. So fire damage actually only does 12% extra damage. If you cast 100% weakness to fire and 100% weakness to magic on a zombie, all of your subsequent spells will deal over 4 times more damage to them. And that's because this 1.6 multiplier becomes 2.6 because 100% is 1, that's what the number is, and 0.7 becomes 1.7. If that zombie is special and he drinks an 80% fire resist, well, that's 2.6 minus 0.8 because that's what 80% is, and my multiplier is now this. So that's how resistances and weaknesses kind of interact with each other. Magic and the element one will multiply together, but if you're only working with fire, for example, it will just be additive. You'll either be adding or subtracting as you do weakness and resistance. Next, we have reflect damage. Reflect damage reduces a % of melee. So it's not a % chance to reduce all melee damage like reflect spell. This is more like armor. If I have 30% reflect damage and 40 armor, well, I'm going to take 40% damage because I'm taking 60% damage from my armor, and then I'm taking 67% damage from my reflect damage. 40% times 67 as a percentage is 40.2. So it's kind of opposite there. We're multiplying the damage taken together. So they're multiplicative, not additive. So if I have 50 armor and 50 reflect damage, I don't get to 100% damage reduction. This can only be acquired as a custom spell with the Tower Birth sign or by selecting the Wound Heart when you're making a new Gatekeeper and you get a greater power from the Gatekeeper. That's in the Shivering Isles. If you want to look that up in the UESP, you can. I don't think it's really worth it. Personally, it's also very expensive. I just don't think you need to do it. There are some special pieces. The Ring of Iron Fist, Amulet of Axe is, and I don't know what this is called. Some Shield of Coral. You can Google it. And all of those together will get you over 100% reflect damage, and that kind of breaks the game a little bit. You still can take damage from ranged attacks, but when you get 100%, all melee enemies deal 0 damage to you, and it doesn't even get to your armor. So I don't really recommend doing that. I think getting 100% reflect damage and 100% magic resist, you don't ever worry about anything in the game. I think it can be very boring. So I don't recommend it. If you're at the armor cap, it's really the only way to reduce this damage. At the armor cap, you take 15% damage. Putting on one of those items gets you to 10. Putting on a second one, you're taking 5% damage. So maybe you want to do that. It's up to you. Shield, well, it's just increasing your armor rating by a flat number. So if I have 65 armor, that means I take 65% less damage. If I add 10, it's just additive. If I cast a shield spell of 10% armor, it goes from 65 to 75%. So it's very straightforward. It's just an additive physical damage reduction. And because of that, it's very, I shouldn't say easy, but it's not that difficult to get to that 85% armor cap. So the closer you are to it, the more you want to cast spells to get to that 85%. Weakness to normal weapons. I've had a lot of questions in my comments about this. It's because of the new blade perk. You can do a power attack as a master and it'll give you 30% weakness to enemies or weakness to normal weapons on the enemy you hit for 10 seconds. This is not really that much in the game. It's just that new blade perk really introduced it in the game. That's why most of us don't know much about it. Otherwise, it's really on just scrolls. It works the same as any weakness. 30% weakness would make you deal 1.3 times damage because 30% is 0.3. This does increase your damage on magical weapons or Daedric weapons or whatever. I know it says normal weapons, but really it should just say weakness to physical weapons or physical damage. All physical damage is increased even by magical weapons. Obviously, if you have a fire enchant on your weapon, the fire damage from that weapon is not increased by weakness to normal weapons, but all of the physical damage is. Okay, next we have Chameleon. A lot of people think Chameleon reduces the chance you are detected. It actually reduces the range that you are detected. So if they detect you from 100 feet away, you have 50% Chameleon, now they'll only see you from 50 feet away. Unlike invisibility, it does not break when you interact with objects, so it can be really useful to have a way to get 100% Chameleon. I don't mind doing it with spells, but if you get enchanted gear that gets you to 100% Chameleon, nothing can ever see you again, and it just breaks the game. I really don't recommend it. Maybe it's worth it to try to play around one time, but anytime I've done it, I've pretty much just quit that character and never wanted to play him again because it is very game-breaking, but it could be fun. Feather, it doesn't actually increase max carry weight, but it reduces the weight of the items you're carrying. And so what that means is if you're carrying 300 pounds of stuff, you can feather up to 300, but feather beyond that won't do anything. So it doesn't actually increase your max carry weight the same way increasing your strength does. Fortifying your strength, remember, that's a temporary increase. It does reduce your encumbrance modifier, which allows you to move and sprint much faster. If you notice, if you put on a bunch of really heavy armor, you will sprint a lot slower in the remaster. In Classic Oblivion, you moved 40% slower, so feathering all that encumbrance away was a 66% speed increase, so it's really nice to do feather. It's also very cheap. It has a base cost of 0.01, so this formula, well, it's magnitude to the power of 1.28, times the duration, so times 120, times the base cost divided by 10. And so, oops, I'm hitting things. I broke my formula. Well, point is, at 33 alteration skill, feather costs 43.5. If you have 100 alteration skill, divide that by 5 again, and it only costs 8 to get 100 feather for 2 minutes. I like to just add that on to a lot of my spells. So if I have 3 different buffs that I typically use, I add that to all of them, and so I always have about 300 extra carry weight, and all of my equipment weighs 0, so it's not slowing me down whatsoever. There's one last thing I should probably talk about with spell absorption. It does not absorb any spells that you cast on yourself, but it does absorb spells from altars and stuff. And for whatever reason, if you cast telekinesis, it does absorb that as well. And because of that, spell absorption can be very game breaking. If you want, get your mysticism up really high, get your spell absorption up to 100% through the Atronach sign and through Spelldrinker's Amulet and the Sorcerer's Ring or spell absorption sigil stones, and then you can just cast an expensive telekinesis spell. As long as you have more than 33 mysticism, it will always give you more magicka than it costs because it's returning the base mana cost, and after 33 mysticism spell, it actually costs less than the base cost because that's how the multipliers work. And so you can just spam telekinesis to restore magicka. And by the time you get 100 mysticism, it's very broken because you restore actually 5 times as much as this base mana cost of the spell. So you can do that. I kind of consider it an exploit, but it can be sort of fun. So that was just a quick overview of some of these. Hopefully you learned something. Thanks for watching.